you could describe the season in one word, what word would you choose?
For
Recording in progress.
For both of us. That's a tough one. I have not tried to sum it up in one word yet. Do you have one?
I'd use a couple words. Good.
Progression.
That's good.
Okay.
Progression.
Yeah, well, I'd say every season's the same way. It's adversity, overcoming it, and then the big picture perspective, I'd say progression. But I think adversity's the name of the game, and I think finding ways to overcome it are critical.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna, in your pregame in Minnesota, they posted a video of you talking about that the only thing to fear was not leaving it all out there. Do you feel like you got everything your guys had to give you?
Yeah, I did, especially, and I think going down the goal and then finding our way back into it after having the goal nullified, I think speaks volumes of the mentality of the group, and they're leaving it all on the field. Before the game, I tapped back into Theodore Roosevelt, the man in the arena, and it's really easy for people on the outside to opine. But again, it's only the guys in the arena that have a chance for victory. And at the same time, it's just dealing with defeat and staring defeat right in the eyes. And so the most important thing is to walk in that place and leave it all on the field, and I think they did that.
And most of what we learn comes in reflection, and I would be interested in both of you, what you've learned from this season as you've reflected from the loss until now.
I think there's not just one thing. I think every day you pick up, little lessons, and I think it was the resiliency and the adaptability of the group that we had. I think was something I learned about the group, and asking them to come into this season. There was obviously some new faces, but there was a lot of old faces that had been with us for a number of years, and play a different style, a different game model, and how quickly they took to that was impressive, and I think a credit to the players. And so, learning their ability to adapt was valuable part of it.
Yeah, I would say, I think that's a good word, adaptability. And, I think just from a coaching perspective, there's, I think, 5 new coaches on the staff, which is like 90% of the staff, or probably a little bit less. And so we all had to adapt. And I think that we were a microcosm of that ability to have things that weren't the way you wanted them. In other words, stepping outside your comfort zone, figuring out a way to work together as a coaching staff, and the players adapting to the way that we wanted to play. And so I think there was a lot of behind the scenes growth that translated onto the field. And I think from a reflection perspective, we improved our game model in almost every statistical area. And I think it's been just so wonderful to watch and see the progress and know that there's a fantastic foundation to continue building on. And then obviously all the struggles that you learn as a competitor, as a teammate, as a coach, those things will fortify you moving forward as well. And so, but there's definitely a lot of ups and downs. It wasn't easy, but there's where I find solace is there weren't excuses. There was just a constant search for solutions, and I think that speaks volumes to the guys in the locker room.
Can I ask one more? Do you have any regrets of the season that stand out to you? Things you would do differently, or adjustments you might make next year?
I don't live like that. I think regret is a strong word for me. I never regret anything. I think if I didn't know something, then I learned from it. And there's a lot to learn from. and there's so many different areas to learn from. So no, I don't think there's any regret.
Obviously, the Gomez transfer comes at a crucial time in the season, and not that results drop off entirely, but I guess wondering are there any lessons learned or thoughts on how you handle those types of things going forward? It's record transfer. I don't think you can fault you for that, but and also just kind of wondering from your perspective. I mean, what are those conversations like when you're in the midst of a run like that and you have to make an important business decision like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of considerations that come into play when just selling players at any time, but especially mid-season like that. As you said, the transfer fee was a record, and it was more than the money. It was a proof of concept for us as we've come in. When new ownerships come in, they've been very supportive about investing in younger, talented players. Andreas being one of the first of those that we brought in, and so being able to show that we can bring a player in, the coaching staff can develop him, and we can turn him into a saleable asset, and then execute that transaction is valuable. It's valuable for the club. It obviously adds revenue for us to hopefully continue to do that again and again. It also helps us in the marketplace, right? And I think, we brought in Dominik Marczuk, who's another really good young player, just got called up to the full Polish national team. And I think a factor in his decision and other young players' decisions in the future will be, these guys show that they can be a pathway for us. And so I think it's gonna help pave the way for us to continue to bring in those young, talented players that can contribute. And look, from a scouting standpoint, we always have to be ready for those types of things. So it's a very challenging situation. But again, is it right for the club? Is it right for the player? Obviously, it's a huge opportunity for the player. Of course, we would have preferred, and in an ideal world, keep him till the end of the season. But there's no guarantees in life. There's no guarantees that the offer's still there in the summer, that they'll loan him back to you. Obviously, that's something that maybe doesn't happen. There's his health, there's his form. Like, there's no guarantees that the same thing's going to be there for you 6 months down the road. And so we have to weigh all those things against each other. And Pablo can talk more about it, but obviously there's the on-field portion as well. And we felt as long as we brought in a player that could play in a similar role and have similar potential and talent, that it's something that we can weather.
I mean, Pablo, I guess I would just ask, like, how do you feel you weathered that, and how would you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are unforeseen when situations like that happen. I think if it was like for like, I think it would have been a lot easier of a transition. I think the effect that it had on Chicho was big, and then obviously Chicho being suspended. So for as much as it was not having Andreas, it was for me, it was kind of the pair, and losing one of those guys I think is fine, but now there's a big load on Chicho to really make up a lot of the numbers that they put up. I think they were close to 60 goal creating opportunity, whether it was goals or assists, and I think that kind of down the stretch was really the issue with us, is that in front of goal we weren't making enough plays, and a lot of that obviously with a guy like Chicho falls, he's got to burden a lot of that, and it just wasn't clicking for him. And so I think, but what I said again about overcoming adversities, Diego Luna had to step up and found his way into some games. So again, I think oftentimes when we speak about these things, we speak in ideal terms, we speak in very black and white, and really it's never ideal. This profession is never ideal, and it's never black and white, because one decision will affect a couple others, some in a good way and some in a not so good way. But at the end of the day, and that's why I always talk about team, is that we've got to find collective solutions to making up for that. And I think we did a good job towards the end part of the season is shoring up the defense, because I think you have to have a strong defense in games that are going to be tight. But we just could not find the same attacking form that we did early on in the season.
Hey Pablo, you spoke a little bit earlier about the changes to your coaching staff. Can you tell us how you your coaching style or your approach evolved over the course of the season? And
Yeah.
if you think if you've targeted areas that you'd like to improve personally for next year?
Yeah, no, great question. You know, we sat in the off season with Kurt and Jason, and it was amazing to see like in how in a couple years of not really scouting coaches, for lack of a better word, how progressive these guys are in the way they think, in the way they present. And for me, the biggest one was their ability to command control of the session the part of the session that they're running. I thought was really, because again, I think the old way of thinking was the head coach's voice is the only voice you hear during the training session. And going the way that we wanted to go was almost having an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator. And then I'm tasked with kind of bringing it all together, and this is the way we think about the game, this is the way we approach the game, this is the way our mindset is. And initially, it was very difficult for myself, Nate Miller, and Anthony Pulis. And then Joel essentially worked with Nate as an attacking coach, and Hamas and Olave worked with Ant as a defensive-minded coach. And so initially, the role, it was really strange for all of us. I wanted to be more hands-on, but I knew I had to leave space for them to feel comfortable and to trust. And so the three of us had quite a few meetings when this started, because someone always had some kind of like weird ego feelings, because they had been head coaches in the USL and had commanded the whole plate. And so I kept saying to them, well, last year I commanded 95% of this too. Like, so just for as uncomfortable as you feel, I feel the same way. And it just took a lot of communication, a lot of being vulnerable. But we found, and we got going right in preseason in Portugal, and it was awesome. And we talked, and we had debriefs after every session, just to make sure that everyone feels good about what we're doing and we're moving in the right direction. Is there anything that anyone feels uncomfortable with your role that's being given? And we just talked through it, and you know, and I think the proof is in the pudding. I think we got off to a great start of the campaign, and so a lot of credit to the coaches for understanding that we all have to give to the team, and even if that means ceding a little bit of the responsibilities that you've had in the past, but this is what we're all doing for the betterment of the team. And for me, it's just, again, the more I'm in coaching, the more I realize it's like any other business. You want good people, you want clear communication, you want standards that you have to maintain. But if you have good communication and you have good people, you can overcome a lot of difficult situations, and I think that's what we did this year.
Thank you. And Kurt, have you identified any areas of weakness or areas of potential improvement in the field, like roster-specific positions that you'd like to address for next year?
In terms of players?
Yes, sir. Are you looking for right backs? Are you looking for wingers?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always looking to improve the team, you know, everywhere. I don't think, you know, if you look at the season we had, it's hard to say that there's a gaping hole in any particular spot. But I think improving, balance of the team, adding a little more help defensively and depth defensively, so that we have more solutions if there's an injury or suspension, when we hit those hardships, and the same thing in the attack. Obviously, you know, with Chicho and how he finished the season, it's important that we find a way to support him and make sure that we put him in good chances to finish his chances, and so that involves maybe some addition in the attack. And you know, again, back to kind of philosophically, what we do as a club, you know, is finding another young, talented player that we can bring in and develop.
Thank you.
I'm curious, you mentioned the back line. I know you brought Brown as an outside back, but do you see him as a center back, if not a starter, at least as a third or fourth?
Yeah, one of the reasons why we brought him in, like, I remember watching Javane in college, and he played center back in South Florida, and you know, so we knew it was something he could do. He's obviously not as big as the traditional MLS center back, so it wasn't a role he settled into in MLS. But he can play right side of a three, he can play right wing back, he can play right back. And he had played right side center back of a three in MLS, so we felt, again, not that he was the 1 or 2 or 3 option there, but we felt confident that in a pinch he could give us good minutes there, and was good to see that pay off.
Obviously defensively, the club improved at the end of the year, a lot of shutouts, just an occasional goal here and there. And there've been switches at goalkeeping. Are you satisfied with what you see with your goalkeepers? Do you need to add somebody to the mix there?
That's a good question. I think we did go back and forth between the two, and it's something that we're gonna have to discuss pretty in depth in the off season. You know, Zach's a veteran, and I thought he finished the season with some really good performances that are what you need from your veteran players in those crunch times. And Gavin's a good young goalkeeper that we need to make sure we keep developing. So how we balance that is an important conversation as we head into the off season.
Is Pablo Ruiz on track to be fully cleared and a full participant at the start of training camp?
He is on track for that. He's not officially fully cleared for it, but the last week or two, I think, or so, like he's been in almost most of training. He's not fully cleared for game performance and 100%, but he's looking really good.
And just to add to that, he's got to come in preseason and hit some specific strength numbers on his knees in order to be cleared to be full go.
And time, sorry, it's like time from surgery plus these strength numbers, and so we haven't hit the time either.
Looking forward to next year and making the team better, how much of that is bringing in more people, but how much of it is continuity? Because this club has had a distinct lack of continuity for a pretty long period of time. Is there a part of you that wants to just let everything sit for a year and see how much internal growth there is?
Do I have to accept the premise of that question? The lack of continuity?
You do whatever.
I don't know if I feel there's a lack of continuity. I mean, especially when you look at like Zach McMath has been here since I've been here, Justin Glad, Andrew Brody, Brian Ojeda came in, I think, in my first year. So, I mean, I don't know, I think we've had a handful of guys, a few guys that have been around for a good number of years. But yeah, we've done it every offseason, every summer, adding new players into the mix, having those players settle, that's gonna help. So I don't know that we've had a lack of continuity, but I think as we sign young players, one of the benefits of that is they are developing. They should be better next year than they were last year. We saw that this year with guys like Luna and Gomez, taking steps forward, and even Ojeda and Emeka Nelly, young players that took big steps forward that we made the decision in the offseason to rely upon, and they came through for us. So yeah, it's development, it's adding a few key pieces here and there, but yeah, I think continuity